We don't have the ability to earn our way back to God, but we don't have to. Your future is secure because of God's grace through your faith and his faithfulness, and nothing can take it away. Talking about the future, when we start mentioning end times and the return of Jesus and the second coming and the fulfillment of prophecy, it often inspires wildly different reactions in different groups of people. Sometimes based on the faith tradition that you grew up in or the lack thereof if you didn't grow up in faith. There are people who hear the words end times and they start getting excited. They're like, oh yes, this is my favorite Bible topic. Here's my charts. This is when Jesus is coming back. I'm pretty sure it's going to be on Tuesday, July. They start getting really excited about the end times. And to those people, I want to say this. The Hebrews had a whole bunch of books of prophecy written in their language to their culture. They missed the first coming pretty badly. In the New Testament, we have one book written in Greek to first century people in a genre called apocalypsis, with which we are generally unfamiliar. And so the chances that we're going to nail down the date of Jesus' second coming wouldn't even be very good if he hadn't said, you don't get to know when, which he did say. And so, not that it's not fun or interesting, but maybe cool out on the charts just a little bit. And then there are other people who start thinking about the end of time and the tribulation and Jesus, and they're like, this stuff's, it's weird and it's a little bit frightening, and I would rather not think about it at all. So can we just say that Jesus is coming back and then not talk about it anymore? And to those people, I want to say 25% of the Bible is prophecy. And for every one mention of Jesus' first coming, there are 8 mentions of his second coming. So clearly this matters. It's important. And it matters because knowing how the story ends shifts the way we live right now, and it equips us to deal differently with loss and pain, which are inevitable and always have been. 2,000 years ago, there was this brand new group of Christians in Thessalonica, and they were waiting for Jesus to come back, and he kept not coming back. Every day they woke up, and again, that was not the day that he came. And they were suffering, and they were dying in the waiting, wondering, how do we navigate a world full of death? And 2 millennia later, we are still in that exact same spot. The death rate continues to hover around 100%. Death is coming for us and everyone around us. And I'm not trying to be dramatic about that. We're all going to die. It's just, none of us are getting out of this alive, right? Which means our questions about how to deal with pain and death and fear are not theoretical, they're personal and they're real. But hope is also real. And that's what Paul tells us in 1 Thessalonians 4. Starting verse 13, he writes this: Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him. I want to press pause here because there's a lot of powerful stuff in these 2 sentences. Remember, Paul's writing to a bunch of people who were fairly new to faith, and so they had these natural questions like, what happens when we die? And what about all the people who put their faith in Jesus and they were waiting for him to come back, but he didn't come back before they died? And how do we navigate our sadness that they're gone? And that last question was particularly poignant for the church in Thessalonica because they existed in the middle of a Greco-Roman culture that treated death with stoicism. I think the way they thought about death is captured pretty well by Homer in the Iliad. There's a scene where Hector, who's maybe the only half-decent person in the entire story, by the way, Hector has been killed by Achilles. And in a rage, Achilles took Hector's body and dragged it away. And his father, King Priam of Troy, is heartbroken and overcome with grief about this. And that reaction upsets the gods. And so Zeus looks down, he's like, Priam can't be like that. And he sends the messenger goddess Iris to tell him to get over it, go get his son's body, bury him, and move on with his life. This is what she says to him. She says, bear up against it and do not give way to grief. Nothing will come of sorrowing for your son, nor will you bring him back to life again. You will only make matters worse for yourself. Nothing will come of sorrowing for your son. For Homer, grief is futile because death is final. This was the culture that the Thessalonian church was living in the middle of. And it's not entirely dissimilar to our culture today. There's still a lot of people who treat death with stoicism. We can't change it. We got to move on. Just get up and get going. And I think in the church sometimes what we do is we take this Greek stoicism that we inherited and we syncretize it with this sort of pietism that says, well, death is a natural part of life, and we know that people go to a better place when they die, and so you need to keep a stiff upper lip. They're gone, but you're still here. So just get off the mat and keep going. It's all okay. And then we go to funerals and we feel ashamed almost to cry. And people say things. I've heard this at almost every funeral I've ever pastored. They look at a body in a casket and they say, oh, he looks so natural. She looks so good. As if to say, this is all okay. And that is such a load of garbage. If you've ever seen a body in a casket, they do not look good. They look gone. Also, it's not okay. You know why it's not okay? Because death is not a normal part of life. It's an invader that was never meant to be part of the human story. We are not meant to die. We're meant to last, and something inside every single one of our souls knows it. So please hear this, that voice in your soul that looks at death, whether it's your own impending death or the death of somebody that you love and says, this is not okay. That voice is not weakness in you. That voice is understanding in you. That you are built, that we are all built for eternity. Because this is why Jesus wept and shook with anger at the death of his friend Lazarus. We kind of gloss over that a little bit in the way we translate the Greek. We're like, he was overcome with sadness. But like, literally, it says that he wept and his body was shaking in rage. And he felt like that even though he knew he was about to raise Lazarus from the dead that day. You're like, why would Jesus react like that? Because death is heartbreaking and infuriating. That's why Jesus reacted like that. And to deny that, I think, is to kill off or at least silence some part of our hearts that makes us human, that knows we're meant for more than just passing through and fading into nothingness and becoming worm food as part of the circle of life or whatever. So I don't want us to miss something critically important that Paul's doing for the Thessalonian church and he's doing for us. He's saying it's okay to grieve. In fact, it's good and necessary because grief is the appropriate response to losing someone you love. To quote the Marvel superhero Vision, what is grief if not love persevering? He's right about that. He's right about that. But we don't grieve hopelessly like so many of the people around us. We don't grieve as though the story is finished being written for Homer, for the Stoics, for so many people we crash into out there in our world who don't know what happens next, who don't know what happens after. Grief is futile because death is final and there's nothing they can change about it. But what Paul is telling us is grief is not futile because death is not final. Grief is real because love is real. And grief is hopeful because death is defeatable. And so I want to give you permission this morning to grieve. Not that you need it from me in any way, but if ever you felt like the message of the church was that it's not okay and that you need to keep a stiff upper lip, like to whatever degree it's helpful for anyone to hear a pastor from a stage say that it's okay, I want to say it, it's okay. In fact, it's good and healthy for you to pour out your pain when you have it. Because as far as I'm concerned, the poet Dylan Thomas, who wrote, "Do not go gentle into that good night, rage, rage against the dying of the light," captured Jesus' attitude toward death a little bit better than the pietistic Stoics who would tell you, it's fine, don't worry, it's a part of life, get going. So grief is good. That's Paul's starting point. But grief without hope is not good. Despair does nothing for our souls. It just numbs and denies and distracts until it becomes this prison that turns our healthy crying into the inertia of collapsing, and we're not meant to surrender like that. We are meant to stand smack dab in the middle of the pain and declare that it will not have the final word. But how? How do we press hope into our grief? Paul says we believe in the gospel. We believe that Jesus came and died and it changes everything. that he stepped into the human story to be with us, that he lived a perfect life, that he willingly laid that life down on a cross to pay the penalty for our sins that we could not pay on our own, and that on the third day, he rose again from the dead and he unlocked death from the inside. And so now death is dead. It still has power in our broken world, but one day it will have no power anymore. That is hope in the middle of our grief. That allows us to grieve differently than anybody else. Like, there's no other religion in the world, there's no other irreligion in the world that has a hope like that, because this hope is anchored not on an idea, but on an event. It's not about some, wish that the words a holy guy once said will eventually come true. It's about a thing that happened that dramatically rerouted the history of the world. It's anchored in the resurrection. Because Jesus rose, we too will rise. Because he defeated death, death doesn't get to defeat us. Even though it's coming for everybody, it doesn't win, it gets reversed. Life and beauty lie on the other side of it, which means we have this bold, countercultural hope as we look out at the brokenness surrounding us and the brokenness within us, that if it's not good, God's not done. In your life, if it's not good, God's not done. The resurrection guarantees that. And so for those of us who've put our faith in Jesus, I want us to know our future is guaranteed by the past. Your future is not teetering on whether you can be good enough or do good enough or accomplish enough to earn your way back to God, which is really good news, because I think something inside all of us knows we don't have the ability to earn our way back to God, but we don't have to. Your future is secure because of God's grace through your faith and his faithfulness, and nothing can take it away.